everything's in Jensen Huang's hands, in a sense. I feel like this is such a good political play. It's almost like he's running for president, but president of China as like the American diplomat to China, because he definitely wants to sell some chips there.
Just think about from December 2025 to right now, the vibe shift with Anthropic. Put aside stock, potential valuations, just the vibe shift. It has been, I don't think anyone could have predicted that. Where the data lives is where it's valuable. And without data and without context, really all of this is pretty irrelevant. Businesses are understanding that this is not something you just plug into your business and it changes things overnight. It is a real process to integrate AI into your business, and it requires reworking systems. I do think that the personal agents have a ton of value, and that's undoubtedly going to be a huge part of all of our lives.
Welcome back to the Daily Stack. Got my co-host Sam Knight. How are you doing today?
What's up, man? How we doing?
Doing good. It's been, I think, nerve-wracking going into Nvidia earnings day. We have a lot of opinions on what's going to happen. Even those that aren't investors, traders in Nvidia or similar stocks. $5.4 trillion company, by far the biggest in the entire world. So everything's in Jensen Huang's hands, in a sense. And I got to pull up this picture from last week. I think we might have chatted on it, but I mean, just man of the people out here. If we pull it up, the amount of the population that's in Asia that just loves, street noodles, he's connecting with them, and he knows, like, I feel like this is such a good political play. It's almost like he's running for president, but president of China as like the American diplomat to China, because he definitely wants to sell some chips there. The secret code word today during the earnings call is definitely going to be China. If there is any indication that we're selling chips there, but there's a lot of trickle down to that, right? Like there's so much of DeepSeek and these other models and Kimi that Americans are concerned about. Like, we're gonna have another DeepSeek moment where suddenly China can replicate and produce cheaper AI and cheaper inference that we can.
Yeah, I love how he just went straight to the streets too. I mean, just like you said, man of the people.
Yeah, just crazy. So, Sam, what's been going on in your world?
Oh, a lot, honestly. It's been. I mean, dude, it's just crazy how much is changing week to week. And, working with a lot of these different businesses, they're always trying to explore. We talked last week about how I'm kind of starting to recommend to people, hey, I think instead of chasing the latest thing, we should focus on the best thing for you, right? And this is something I've been thinking about a lot for myself too, actually, just really scaling back on new experiments and really trying to master and refine the things that are really, really working. And a lot of this too is just kind of where you're going to place your bets for yourself, for your business, for your workflow. A lot of it is just kind of trying to see out in the future where you think is going to happen. And, we talked a little bit about OpenClaw. We talked about the different personal agents. We talked about kind of the major lab agentic structures. And so I've been working on all this a lot and just thinking about it a lot too. And some news related to that as well we can get into, but
yeah, I think you so much of the consulting now is like, have to stay on top of the news just to like advise people on that, that project we just started or that cron job we set up. Is that the right way to continue going, or is that burning tokens in a way that's just not feasible? You even have, I can't remember who started the argument, but it was like even an Anthropic engineer was saying HTML is actually better for agents than Markdown. And people are like, what? Like, this is, we don't need to know HTML too. Like, this is too much. And I think for the average, listener right now, don't go switch to HTML. Stick with Markdown for now. It's way simpler, I think, to understand. Or you don't really have to understand it, but like to recognize, and more agents are going to recognize it, and more agentic systems are going to recognize Markdown. But that was a curveball. It's not that complicated, but it's still a curveball.
Absolutely. No, for sure. And I mean, dude, it's honestly, as someone that works in this every day, it's blowing my mind. You saw with Andre Karpathy, he's going to Anthropic. I mean, that's like LeBron getting traded to, one of the main competitor teams. He was a co-founder of OpenAI. He was really the pioneer for Tesla AI, their neural net that runs all of their autopilot stuff, self-driving. So, he's the one that's been pioneering a lot of this stuff as well. And so I was really thinking about that and what does this actually mean like for the industry? What is the ramifications of this? Because he is truly like one of the most talented, gifted people in this space. And he's going to be bringing in probably do all sorts of stuff, to be honest with you. But one thing that he talks about a lot is how the wrappers across these models is not going to be the moat long term. What's the moat is the context, the workflows, the skills, the memory, and the data that makes it actually useful, right? And that kind of goes back to the personal agents and the business agents. And so it's going to be so cool to watch how this unfolds. Dude, it's crazy. What are we in May? Just think about from December 2025 to right now, the vibe shift with Anthropic. Put aside stock, potential valuations, just the vibe shift. It has been, I don't think anyone could have predicted that.
Yeah. It's so much so that OpenAI, right? Like they feel like Anthropic came in so hot with so many products so fast. They, soft release like Mythos, and they're like, all these stories about it. That OpenAI went out and spent $100 million on like a podcast, a live stream like this one, like that, to change the narrative, to have influence, to, be in front of all these like business leaders that are like making decisions on like who they partner with and like which tokens they want to consume. And so just crazy how much that affects things. And I think also like politically they've, that's been a huge decision of like how you navigate that storm of we don't want to work with the Department of Defense, and we don't want to like have these models and feeling confident enough to make that decision that it's not going to wreck your business, or potential shareholders and like the IPO aren't going to push back. Like, but they must be very confident in like their long-term consumer value that they provide.
For sure. And I think they're kind of betting on essentially Claude being like an operating system and like building these adoption layers around it. And, Codex is a great product. By the way, GPT 5.5 is a great model, but it's just like when you're second to market, I feel like that's a big deal. Codex basically followed up with Claude Code, and they're both really, really good actually. But just once again, that vibe shift, it's hard to get that back once you lose it. And so with this hire, it's crazy, dude. It's really, I feel like I'm watching sports at this point, honestly. And there's rivalries, there's all types of animosity. The political stuff is a whole nother discussion because, we talked about Nvidia, we talked about Jensen. He's on one side of how he feels we should work with China. But you look at Dario, you look at really all the AI labs, they're kind of on the other side. They're like, I don't know if that's a good idea. I don't think we should do that. And I get their point and I get his point. So you also factor in society and how they're feeling about data centers and the pushback and what we're seeing. It's crazy the pushback we're seeing on that. So it's a very tumultuous time, and it's really unclear how it's all going to play out.
So Eric Schmidt, recently, was it over the weekend, booed for having a commencement speech at Arizona, and is booed over the use of AI. He's talking about, hey, this is your future. This is what you need to prepare for, almost like a challenge of like, get in the AI economy and control the technology to like shape your future, instead of the technology shaping your future, is that you're shaping the technology. But it wasn't received well. I think there's a lot of nervous people in that graduating class. It sounds like they don't have a really good jobs locked in. The labs are only hiring so many people, and it's probably coming into a market where hard to say. Maybe it's the type of job that isn't available yet. It's like they want to be, those TikToks and those Instagrams where it's like people in like a tech office and they're dancing and it's like passing, videos between them, and day in the life of like working at like Yelp in 2016, and that's not the case anymore. Like Google and sitting on a beanbag chair. Like they want to be in beanbag chairs. They're not in beanbag chairs. They're like having to go really scrape and find ways to provide value. So I had never seen this. And Arizona is not the place I would expect necessarily to booze. Like you'd think it'd be, something like a Cal Berkeley where history of like protesting and they want to speak out against like any speaker really. But here just, very interesting.
It is. And The reality is we live in kind of an information society, and I think there's 24/7 an information war going on, and it's really tough to tell what's organic, what's not organic, because with the AI stuff, the pushback is, like you said, it's the jobs, it's the displacement, but it's also the data centers with the environment, and it's just
Yeah.
even unclear about what's even true with that. How damaging is it? You hear for 100 people, you hear 100 different things. It's really hard to just discern what is actually going on here. What does society actually think? Is this legit? Do people really have problems with this? I tell you, you get on I live in Georgia, and you get on
Yeah.
TikTok and you just get hit with videos of people saying they're going to build a data center here and they're going to take this home away from this 90-year-old woman. And I'm just like, this is crazy. I mean, this is seriously crazy. So, it's just they don't have this type of pushback in China, and obviously for obvious reasons. And is this going to slow down progress? Should it slow down progress? I mean, like I said, you talk to 100 people, you literally get 100 different opinions, but it's very hard. I think discernment's the best word I could use. It's really hard to just discern what's actually going on here.
Yeah. Yeah. And how often, there is conflict. Like there was a good breakdown. I was watching the OpenAI live stream TBPN the other day, and I think it was Monday, and they were talking about like the pushback in Utah, and they were like,
Hmm.
they're building a data center in like an empty valley, in the
Yeah,
desert. Like that is like the one place you should be building data centers. Let's push it back against, neighborhood noise and areas
certainly.
where it hurts quality of life for people. But if it doesn't hurt quality of life and if there's not a huge environmental impact from what we know, let's focus on those areas first. Like there's plenty of like mountain ranges in Nevada that could probably use a
Right.
data center and maybe provide more jobs, right? Like that's a good the thing is if we can put the data centers here versus Paraguay or versus other areas with cheap power, that's going to be more jobs in the US.
I think a big part of the problem is just the marketing, if you will, from the AI industry is atrocious. They've done
Yeah.
such a bad job. And actually, a couple of days ago, Tucker Carlson and Kevin O'Leary had a really interesting debate on data
Really?
centers and just AI in general. It was really fascinating. Um, and normally Kevin O'Leary is like very sharp, in my opinion. He really comes with good points, but the points Tucker would bring, and I'm not really picking a side. It's just that like Kevin O'Leary kept going back to but China, we can't let China. And I just don't think that's really going to work for the average person. I just
Mhm.
don't think they're as concerned about China as they are their jobs, their neighborhoods, their local environments. And if they have this vision in their head that these data centers are going to take all the water and if we don't fix the marketing problem, progress is definitely going to stall. So,
Yeah.
I think we might have even talked about in a previous episode, Dario Anthropic, he's a doomer. He's always talking about how, I mean, he's not a doomer. I guess he's an optimist for AI, but talking about the ramifications of society, he does not hold back. And lately, Sam Altman has kind of shifted his angles and his viewpoint to kind of be more positive. But if they don't get the message, like after this, like what we have on the screen, that there is a serious problem here, something's going to have to change. I mean, it's just the marketing and the positioning, if you will, is terrible, and they need to figure out a way to make people not afraid and say, hey, number one, this is inevitable, so it doesn't really matter what we all think.
Yeah.
Number two, it's not as bad as you think because X, Y, and Z. More new jobs will be created. Think about pre-internet, post-internet. It's very similar. There's just different angles I feel like we could go about it instead of saying, well, every single software engineer and every single white collar worker is going to be wiped off the planet. And you're not going to have any money to eat. So we might have to give you some universal basic income. Like that's just not going to work. So as someone that's just actively in this space, I'm obviously not in the political side by any means, but it's just when I talk to random people and they voice some of these concerns, it's just interesting to hear these just kind of regular people, their opinions, their thoughts, and what they're getting fed.
Yeah, and that's it. The best part is getting people that aren't in the industry that are like
Mm-hmm.
so that have a vested interest or they, have encountered so much that like it's not representative of like what the truth is, right? Or like what
Yes.
the average person thinks. And I think that's something that's like we don't get that enough. And I feel like that
Mm-hmm.
like Sam Altman would probably agree of like they early on haven't gotten enough of the really good feedback that they needed to make sure they're communicating in the
Right.
right way. So, question for you: What's maybe been the biggest change in the last month when you're working with businesses and clients on what you're recommending? I have a good example. I'll let you go first, but I have a good example of like one thing that's changed for me, and and yeah,
So
Jump
Yeah,
in.
yeah, great question. So honestly, dude, the biggest change is it's a couple things. One is that I think businesses are understanding that this is not something you just plug into your business and it changes things overnight. It is a real process to integrate AI into your business, and it
Yeah.
requires reworking systems. It requires building foundations that the agents can live on top of so that they can plug into your existing infrastructure. That's been a big one. But also, not wanting to get too tied into one group or the other. They don't want to be totally dependent on Anthropic. They don't want to be totally dependent on OpenAI or so on and so forth. So building harnesses that actually
Yeah.
allow them to kind of evolve and rotate. That's been a big one. And then the biggest things are I'm seeing businesses not as interested in the hype cycles anymore. They're not worried about what the latest and greatest is. They just want to focus on the actual needle moving activity because they're starting to really invest serious capital into these changes. And so really just kind of drilling down into the basics and just starting from first principles instead of worrying about, oh, this agent did this or this product can replace my CMO. It's like, let's just start building this into our business in a way that's scalable, in a way
Yeah.
that we're not trapped and we don't have vendor lock. And to me, that's actually a good sign because it's like we're kind of starting to level off a little bit. And now we can
Yeah.
actually focus on the building and what actually matters as opposed to the latest X video that went viral.
Yeah, that's a really good point of when you're not chasing when you're not chasing the flashy stuff, then it's like it's totally not I think you can cut out a lot of the complexity of managing because so much of the management side is real. It's a tax of
Very much.
I felt that with OpenClaw was why am I spending all day just like fixing cron jobs and
Same.
fixing like quality of output? This isn't what I want to do.
Yeah, I mean, even for me, I've almost reverted back to fully just working with Claude Code and Codex because I realized that it's just less bandwidth for me. It works
Yeah.
really well for what it works for, and I do think that the personal agents have a ton of value, and that's undoubtedly going to be a huge part of all of our lives. In what way, shape, or form, I think we're still kind of figuring that out.
Yeah.
But for like 90% of what I'm doing, these tools just nail it for me, and really it's work related stuff. I think where the personal stuff comes in is life related and, communication and booking flights and, things like this. But between Claude Code and Codex, I mean, they're both getting so good. It's almost scary. And that's another reason why, this hire by Anthropic is going to be really interesting to see because I have an opinion and I don't want to derail us too much, but I think that Anthropic is going to be releasing, for lack of a better term, like an app store essentially, where people can create skills, markdown files, context that people can buy and license and rent, or, it remains to be seen how that's going to play out. But just based on his tweets and things he's talked about, to me, I could see them going that direction. And, it incentivizes developers or just regular people like, hey, I've created this tool that works really well. Let me put this up here. And this is kind of the first glimpse that I'm seeing of like, could this be the next generation app store? It's like skills and markdown files and context. And, I have data that you don't have, but you can license this data or rent this data. I don't know. We'll see how it plays out, but I feel like that's kind of where some of this is going to go.
Yeah, it's super interesting on the side of like, is it going to be enough to change the narrative and like help them market? Look, like go in, build a skill, build a really quality product, and then you can sell it. And the only concern I have is like, is it going to be like the App Store where there's going to be like a 30% tax, or is it going to be something where it's so competitive, like starting a YouTube channel? Where you're not going to make money for 3 years. Like you're going to be working so hard. And that's where people say like, don't quit your job and start a YouTube channel unless you're really good and like you're crushing it. Like obviously you're an outlier, but for the average person, it does take, unless your niche is really hot, it does take a lot of time, for the average person to do something. And you're going to be stressed out. The content you create is not going to be as good because you're forced, it feels like a business and like putting food on the table. So yeah, I'm concerned like that would be the case of like big promises of this is the new economy, but then average person making a solid living, not as viable.
100% agree. Yeah, it's like I said, it's a little too early to tell, but you think about there's the Chrome App Store, there's the Shopify App Store, and obviously Apple and iOS and Android app stores, of course. If it's done correctly, it can be great all around. because it benefits the business, it benefits the developers, and it benefits the users.
Yeah.
Now, what does that look like? And what does that even mean exactly, App Store? We'll see. But I feel like workflows, skills, markdown files is kind of like the V1 of what it could potentially look like. And another thing is too, I was working with this investment bank and they were looking at between building like custom software in their business to licensing out some of these other tools that basically venture funded startups essentially that have solved their problem. And then, Anthropic rolls out investment banking plugins and it just completely wipes them out. And so is that the new startup, like going into a lab and like building something on top of it? I don't really know. I mean, it's just crazy, man. It's so unclear.
Yeah. One piece so last week we talked about, been using OpenClaw for a couple months, and then last Sunday started a Hermes agent. And so barely, was barely in there, barely scratching the surface since then. And so, one of the pieces I talked about was installing Hermes on the same device, a Mac Mini, that I have OpenClaw. And so when you install it, like Hermes can read all of these markdown files, unless you have them like hidden or like, password protected. Like it's reading the entire OpenClaw history, all the skills, all the personality, all of that. So you can port that over, or like I did, it was like start fresh, but then it had all this context, which was actually like, it ended up being a really good route to go. And then now come in a week later, honestly, it's been like a beautiful experience. I think after babysitting for so long, it's been so fun because it just works. It's like consistently updating skills. One thing I changed is I think at the beginning, there was a ton of hype around like sub agents and thinking of those as agents and then saying, look, I have 10 employees now. All these 10 like OpenClaw agents work underneath me. Huge factor is if you run a business is you don't necessarily want to be a super flat org where you're managing every single person. And I think there's like a bunch of complexity there. So I'd say a huge switch from OpenClaw into Hermes agent for people is I want to abstract as much of that away. I want to have a general manager that's an agent that like I don't really need to know every time, like it, as long as the costs are managed, I don't need to know like every single model that's being used. I need to know from like a monthly perspective and like updating keys and making sure, using the right plan. But generally there's a ton of minutia of like, do you really need to know how each process is done? Like probably not. Like you really just want to see the result, and because it's so much time saving. So Hemi, whatever we call him, is our Hermes agent. And so breaking him down as the general manager. And then when we have our 21 rate site, we have support growth, we have our directory, like company directory, that's been a big project of every like Bitcoin company out there, as well as our like daily stack editorial stuff. So bringing in content as well as daily stack production, helping us with streams. All of these are sub agents, and I'm not trying to like get to know each one of them. It's a whole totally different way for managing that. And some people did that the right way the first time. I didn't. I was like, I think everyone is like agent maxing and trying to have the most agents under their, direct reports to say, hey, I'm important. I have a lot of agents, just like people say, hey, I, manage 80 people. It's a lot of extra headwork, like, headaches you really don't need.
It's kind of like that hype cycle that we were talking about, right? It's like, I have the most sub agents.
Exactly.
Interesting. I'm curious, this is obviously a good bit of work. I mean, do you have any estimates of kind of what your token spend is per month approximately?
That's a good question.
And the reason I ask that is because I think there's the reason I see a lot of people hesitate to leave the lab kind of agents, if you will, Claude Code, Codex, whatever, is because they're obviously heavily subsidizing those subscriptions right now. And I think the fear is you get super embedded with the, APIs. And then at a certain point, that cost is going to 10x or 50x or, no one really knows, but that's kind of the fear that I keep hearing. Because actually I was working with an executive and I was kind of recommending almost something like this for him. Yeah. And he was just like, well, this is my fear. And I was like, that's a pretty valid fear. So I'm just, so I was just curious right now. It'd be interesting to know the answer to that question now. Check back in 6 months, check back in 12 months and just see how much it changes.
Yeah. So right now, using Codex Auth, So using
Okay.
a OpenAI,
Nice.
ChatGPT, $200 a month plan, like max, but for $200 a month, getting like 5 employees, 6
That's insane.
employees is awesome. Like there's so much that it would take so long to onboard and
Hmm.
train, an average employee. Versus here, it's like they're gonna stick with you forever. You have like Timothy, the main agent, train them into this process. So right now, using the Codex auth, I've only dipped below 90% once, and I'm also using
Wow.
Codex, the same subscription
Wow.
for like coding, like for like
Okay.
actually building an app. So it's wild because powering an Hermes agent and with all these processes, 5 sub agents underneath like the main one, and doing on the side using Codex, like the app itself to be coding. I am absolutely something to be concerned about. What I would change, let's say post May, because OpenAI has been subsidizing so much. Post May, the token allowances are going to come down, even on the
Mm.
max plans. And so, what I'll need to do is keep the main agent Timothy on this Codex plan, or consider like a Claude Max plan, and then each sub agent then optimize. I think a really good one could be Gemini 3.5, the
Hmm.
Gemini Flash 3.5,
Yep.
and a really good reason for that most small business owners should think about. I'm sure you've chatted with them like about this is um, depending on how you're set up. Like I get like a ton of Gemini usage just from having a Google Workspace and have a Gmail, and I'm not gonna lose I'm not gonna like lose my Google. I'm gonna keep paying $80 a month or whatever that is, so
Totally.
that we all have these like domain tied emails like at 21 rates or at Daily Stack. And if I'm paying for that, then using a cheap Google model, whether or not I can't really like run the whole agent on it for sure. But there are some processes that you can run pretty cheap, I believe, like just using Google.
Certainly, and I think if there's one tip of the day, it's if you're going to do something like this, Codex auth is the way to do it for sure. Because Claude doesn't really allow that anymore. It was a big point of contention. Now, be interesting to see with their Colossus collaboration with XAI, or I guess SpaceX. They signed a big deal with Google in terms of their data centers.
Yeah.
Maybe they'll open something up similar to that. But I think that is an absolute steal right now. The
Yeah.
ability to essentially use Codex in there, because like you said, for $200 a month to get this type of output, it's mind blowing.
Yeah. And it works. And I was reading yesterday about like Codex versus Claude, and like a big actually I already have it up, so I'll let me pull it up. Is looking at a max plan, or using 2 max plans, is Hermes. This is Sean, I believe Sean Holmberg. How much does it run, or does it cost to run a Hermes agent company? Hermes is free and open source, and then ChatGPT Pro, $200 a month. That's what I'm using. $200 a month for Claude Max, or a similar amount in API. VPS, that's something we kind of touched on earlier, but instead of getting a Mac Mini, or like last week, the differences in like having a cloud hosted, so don't have sensitive data on there. It's gonna be, could be like less performance wise, but I do think I'm gonna look into that for like a backup while I'm traveling, is running a small agent on a VPS, but $400 a month. So all in, if we're looking at that and you can continue running, that's not that bad. And I think even if you lose token limits on the max plans, is using whatever you lose, I think you should be able to backfill. It's going to take a little more work and expertise,
Mm-hmm.
but backfill with the right cheap agents. And I think 2 to 3 weeks ago, when we had Noah Breyer on, he was saying Gemini Flash was like that is the good cheap model to go to. Like
Mm-hmm.
it performs really well.
Really well. And yeah, well, I have an iOS app, and that's kind of like the model we use, because it can also, now with 3.5, it can reason over such a large amount of data so quickly. So that was a really cool announcement from Google. What was that,
Yeah.
yesterday? Yeah.
Yeah. Like I thought it was they had like 40,000 people watching the live
Mm-hmm.
stream yesterday. Another one I want to bring up, and curious your take on this. Notion. So we did we've been using Notion for a while before like we really got into like the agent side, project management tracker, everything. And so my approach in the past like 6 months has been around, okay, this is our shared brain. Like we can plug in every agent. So if I have somebody in this side of the company, if they're making something on their end with Claude, make it the same way and have the same instructions and read the same like company manual that my agent's using and like anybody else's agent's using. Also, when you're doing projects, don't save it as a local MD file, but like create a Notion page that everyone can see. And the cool thing is like, let's say the agent leaves, you know, you fire it for some reason, you shut it down, the employee leaves that you're working with. It's like in seconds, you can put an agent into, you know, a new employee can spin up an agent and just know everything and just reads Notion through the MCP and just sees everything that has happened. And it's all like what you feed it, like the quality information, how up to date it is. So we've been using that as the shared brain and having some just like durable information and storage. But now Notion's doing a developer platform. So being able to like, they had some custom agents, which I've like experimented with, but it looks like here you can actually pull in more data connections, pull in more of your like ServiceNow, NetSuite, HubSpot, Salesforce, and then being able to do like custom tools for your agents. So getting in deeper to have a central place where, like, let's say you want to pull a bunch of like HubSpot data in and then also have an agent, but you don't necessarily want the agent talking to HubSpot directly. But if the HubSpot can connect to Notion and the agent connects to Notion, okay, now you have a centralized neutral space to then do some work that's quality.
So crazy because first of all, I've been a Notion user like basically since it came out, but over the last year, I've transitioned heavily to Obsidian because it was such a good tool. And now I'm like, I don't know if that was the right choice or not, because Notion, one thing about them, dude, they are so good at innovating and staying up to date and evolving with what's going on. I mean, they truly have one of the best product teams in the world, I feel like. And I probably shouldn't have discounted them the way that I did because
they locked
really
themselves in a room in Japan, or maybe they never locked themselves in a room. They moved to Japan solo, or like
just to
three of them.
like lock in basically. And they're incredible. And so, I mean, this makes so much sense. And what's so interesting about this, and this is kind of what I'm seeing as well, is instead of going to a business and building, you know, custom software, you're doing things like this, you know, like you're building tools on top of tools and, you know, agentic layers that it's like a glass pane on top of Notion that connects to HubSpot. And so, you know, it's just the last 20 years, like new softwares, new SaaS would get created, but now it's like, oh, well, let's just use Notion. Let's build something custom on there and make sure it connects to HubSpot and have that data go back and forth, whatever the use case is for the business. And so there's a lot more building within software than building new software that I'm seeing a lot, at least from a lot of businesses' perspectives.
Yeah. And is it, you know, also familiarity? Like if you've gotten used to Notion, at least you're like, there's so many things you don't have to teach. I mean, it can get, I mean, Notion by itself, when you're compared to other project management tools, I think was a lot of customization, but
sure, especially
a blank canvas is hard.
Yeah. And also it's got the context, and that's what we're seeing with AI. Like where the data lives is where it's valuable. And without data and without context, really all of this is pretty irrelevant. You may as well just go into a chatbot and talk to it. So, you know, that data, that context, it all lives inside of Notion. People have had stuff stuffed in there for years, and data is really proving to be like the digital gold.
Yeah. Data's the new oil, you know, and now I think it's interesting because it's a really good point, because data's the new oil, but it's not like the only gasoline engine isn't like Fang or Mag 7, right? That are using these massive quantities of data to make decisions on serving you better ads, and they're making money. Exactly. So I think like putting data and making it usable in people's hands where it's actually them interacting with it. It's not like they're targeting people for ads. Not every business is doing that, but it's like, oh, hey, here's every, you know, personal note, or not personal note if it's like private on their desktop, but every like bug report, every like small thing I ran into, you know, before agentic, you know, was even a part of our vocabulary, it now can read that so fast in seconds. And then it's like, okay, hey, well, let's move ahead and do this. One thing that's crazy is I spent a lot of time, and like last night till like 12:30 is even doing API connections to our website. And so really like building this big, you know, unified API that goes through and makes a ton of changes. But the way I'm structuring it, and this is great for people that have more complex websites, because we're building this like built like Bitcoin company directory on 21 rates, but building it like a unified API where we can make a lot of these updates and have the agent do it. But we also need to think about rate limiting around like monitoring around, you know, making sure like we don't prompt injection. It's not making, you know, sweeping like, you know, hallucinations that would change a lot of data. But it's a big learning experience, but it's so possible now because the agent is obviously telling, hey, here's the API that I want, go build this. Here's the documentation I need, go build this.
Yep.
So it sounds like Notion's going to make that a little easier for people,
Mm-hmm.
you know, just with a direct place where you're not coding to HubSpot, you're not trying to code to Salesforce. Those platforms aren't going to even let you do that unless you get API approval.
Well, on that note, you know, Salesforce had a huge announcement. I think it was last week. They're going headless now, and so their goal is pretty similar. You know, I mean, I think Mark Benioff is one of the great entrepreneurs of our time, in my opinion. I think he sees the writing on the wall. It's like, does it really make sense to go through this clunky software that probably needs to be rebuilt? To be honest with you, blah blah blah, or does it make more sense to go headless and just make it a lot more seamless and make it a lot more streamlined? He was also on the All In podcast and talked a little bit about it as well. What they're trying to do with Slack. And so I think that, you know, it's pretty much in line with what Notion's trying to do too.
Yeah. All right. So I do have to wrap it. We're having a crazy week this week traveling. But for everyone, Nvidia, we'll keep you guys posted. I think Avi's going to be talking about it later with a breakdown. Sam, we appreciate it as always. What's the best way to follow you? What's the best way to like get in touch with your company? If you're a small business, how do we work with Sam if we're trying to, you know, make everything internally?
Yeah. So my YouTube channel is where I'm most active, working on X, but right now I'm most active on YouTube. It's just Sam Knight AI. Really what I try to do is just provide insights for people that might not be engineers. Like I really try to make it as non-intimidating as possible, because even the conversation we just had, it might have people's heads spinning. So it's just very simple, one workflow per video. Here's how you can do this. And so if you're just looking to kind of just sharpen your tool set, sharpen your skills, you can go there and check it out. My business is Integri. So it's like integrate AI. It's just integri.biz. You can book a call with me there. But really what I would recommend is just going to the YouTube, finding a topic that you might like. I've got several in the queue that I think are going to be really solid. And there's also a link in all the videos to join my email list. Might spin out a school community or something at some point. But right now, just really focused on how can we make this as digestible for everyone. So that's what I would recommend.
Yeah, perfect. So we'll drop a link in the chat, both to YouTube and to Integri. And yeah, go hit up Sam. And we'll see you guys next week.
All right. Great chat.
Yeah. Take it easy.
See you, man.